Have you ever tried to describe something that is so grand, so glorious, so great, and yet words fail you? And so you start trying to describe the matter with it. Well, it's like this or it's like that. That's the way Jesus tried to explain what the kingdom of heaven is like. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus, in trying to describe what the kingdom of heaven is like, told parables. And in this chapter, he tells 7 parables of trying to explain what the kingdom of heaven is like. Simply put, a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like. The first parable Jesus tells is one of his most famous parables. The sower who went out to sow seed, and the seed fell on 4 different types of soil. Some fell beside the road, meaning there are some who do not understand the gospel, and the evil one snatches the seed away from them. The seed that falls on the rocky soil, which springs up quickly but has no root, like the person who gladly and joyfully hears the gospel but doesn't grow, has no understanding, does not have any foundation for their faith, and they, as Jesus says, they fall away when there's hard times, when there's affliction or persecution. Third type of soil. First type of soil beside the road, second type rocky, third type is thorny soil, where the seed falls among thorns and tries to grow among them, but instead is choked out. Jesus said that is like the person who tries to mix the gospel with all of their worries and wealth, and the gospel gets choked. Finally, the fourth soil that the seed falls upon, the sower cast about, is the seed that falls on the good soil. Jesus says that's a person who hears and understands the gospel and bears fruit in their life. Then he tells other parables. He talks about the parable of the wheat and tares, or the wheat and the weeds, explaining that the enemy sows seeds among the good seeds. The enemy sows weeds. Jesus explains, though, that those weeds will be separated from the wheat finally at the day of judgment. Not now, because the trying to pull out the weeds, the wheat can be injured. He tells the parable about the mustard seed, about things that start small, grow large. He talks about hidden things. The fourth parable about the leaven that was hidden by the woman in the flour. He talks fifthly about the treasure that's hidden in a field, and about the man who runs to sell all and buy the field. Or he talks about the merchant seeking fine pearls, and once he finds that pearl, he sells all to be able to buy it. Then Jesus tells about the dragnet that's cast into the sea and catches both good fish and bad fish. And Jesus explains that in the end, the wicked will be separated from the righteous, the good fish, the bad fish. And then finally, Jesus tells another brief parable about the head of the household who brings out his treasures, things that are both new and old. In these 8 parables, Jesus has some strong words of warning. He talks about even a judgment of fire. Verse 30, first gather up the tares, bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat in my barn. He's talking about the parable of the wheat and the tares, of the wheat and the weeds. Gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat in my barn. And then in verse 49, Jesus says, so will it be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth and take out the wicked from among the righteous, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. As we've looked in past chapters in Matthew, Jesus does not hesitate to talk about a time of accountability for decisions that have been made, about accepting or rejecting the person of Jesus Christ. And he talks about sure and certain and terrible judgment. Finally, in this chapter, let me point out 2 quotes of Jesus. Verse 12, for whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. And then finally, to close the chapter, Matthew inserts this quote of Jesus. Verse 57 and verse 58. Prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and in his home household. And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. In this chapter, Jesus talks in parables. He talks about the gospel. He talks about accepting the gospel and the consequences of being